Hi, friend. Shalina Ayana here. And this special episode, I am joined by my husband, Ben, from Evolving Man. And this is a two-part series in which we talk about parenting, relationships, and some of the shocking statistics of how many couples get divorced or break up within the first year of having a child. And there's a lot of intimate, vulnerable conversation that happens in this episode where we talk about and unpack some of our own challenges that we've been coming up against since becoming parents ourselves. And so it was pretty vulnerable to record this episode, but we really wanted to share it with you in the spirit of authenticity and connecting with other people who are on the same path. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Part 1 is here on my channel. Part 2 is linked below. It is at Evolving Man on Ben's channel. So you can click the link below this description here and go on over to watch part 2 when you're finished. It'll also be linked at the end of this episode. All right, I'll see you at the end. I can't wait to hear what you think about this episode.
Hello, everyone, and hello, Shalina. My name is Ben Goreski, and I am your husband. I am also your co-host for this video/podcast episode. And who am I sitting with?
Hello, everybody. My name is Shalina Ayana, and I am your wife. I'm also the author of a book called Becoming the One and the founder of Rising Woman. And we sort of do the same thing in different ways.
We do sort of do different things in different ways. I work with men, you work with women. We were just talking before we hit record here and talked about how in many ways we're dealing with opposite sides of a spectrum. And we are taking a very special moment here to sit down and do a recording. We don't do this very often. We have a child, we have a daughter, and I think this is the first time we've done a recording since she came along.
Yeah, it is.
She's over 10 months old now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a while since we've actually talked. We recorded your Becoming the One episode for my podcast.
Yeah, when I was like very pregnant.
Mm-hmm. And so the intention is to check in with the community, say hi to folks, talk about what you're up to, what you're seeing in the field, share any insights that are coming through for you right now. And same for me. And particularly, I think a good place to start is parenthood, because that's really what we're being initiated into right now and really what we're learning about right now. So let's start there.
Yeah. It's been amazing and really hard. And I mean, it's not even really been hard in terms of like, is it hard to have a child? A lot of people say yes. And of course it is in some ways, but I don't experience that part as hard. I really love it.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
I think it's the relationship stuff, like you and I, that's been the most challenging for me.
Yeah.
And how much everything changes in the relationship. Like the relationship we had is just gone. You know, it's not the same relationship anymore. And I remember in the beginning, like right after we had her, you and I were in this honeymoon phase again. We were like in this brand new love bubble. We were so in love with each other. We're just professing our love to each other every day, and it felt so good. And I was like, oh, this is the best. And then I think it took like 3 months for that bubble to burst, and it sort of went to the opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And it's just been really, really hard on us relationally. And so I've learned a lot. I've had a lot of compassion for other parents, and I'm really excited to talk about it today because it's not something I see people talking about a whole lot.
Yeah.
And we need that. Like we need other people to talk about it, especially when you have a relationship where everybody, you know, puts photos of you on their vision board and they probably project that your relationship is something other than what it really is.
You're talking about us.
Yeah. I mean, people walk up to me and they're like, I have a photo of you and Ben on my vision board. And I'm like, oh, no.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Take me down off of there.
Yeah. I'm not sure you want to do that. And I mean, yeah, we have amazing moments. And I think that there's a lot of things that we do really well. And I also know like the last, 10 months of entering into this new phase has been like chaos in some ways for us, and we're just starting all over again. So
Yeah, I think at the very least, the vision board thing is rationalizable when you look at the ideal that you and I are shooting for, and that what we're trying to represent.
Totally.
But the reality of things is always different than the ideal. And yeah, I think you're right. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've heard the phrase like, "Oh, being a parent is the hardest thing in the world, but it's
Mm-hmm.
the best thing in the world." And I'm starting to get more of an idea of what that means for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm with you that the hardest part of this isn't necessarily dealing with our daughter and trying to figure out what she needs and how to be a good parent, and constantly having to deal with your own uh, inability to give her everything she needs in every
Mm-hmm.
moment, and just screwing up, and her falling and hurting herself, and just the pain that comes with that, the sleepless nights,
Mm-hmm.
um, the constant change, and the incessant need that
Mm-hmm.
she has
Mm-hmm.
to be watched and cared for. I feel like we were ready for that.
Yeah.
Like we're both in our mid 30s,
Mm-hmm.
and
Well,
when
you're in
we,
your late 30s, but I'm in my mid 30s.
yeah,
Yeah.
love that distinction. Always comes out three 3 years older. For sure. I know I'm 39. I've been like constantly saying to myself lately, like, I'm 40. I'm 40. Like, I'm
Yeah.
just getting in the headspace of being 40 so that when 40 comes, I don't slip into a depression. Um, but I think we were ready for it. Like, we were
Yeah.
ready. You know, when we really started talking about conceiving, we were kind of like, okay, like, we feel like we've mastered some things in life. We
Mm-hmm.
figured some shit out, and let's embark on a new adventure,
Yeah, we were
you
in a
know?
really good place. Like our relationship was as close to perfect as I think it was going to get for us. We
Mhm.
weren't fighting. If we had any sort of tiff, it lasted a minute. We were just so good at just moving through stuff really quickly and like letting each other be in our own lanes. And I remember sitting at dinner with you once and being bored.
Mm.
Not bored with you or bored with our relationship, but bored in the sense that neither of us had enough stimulation from our environment.
Or in a way like challenge, like,
Yeah.
okay, come bring on a little bit of a different challenge here.
Yeah,
We
we
need
were
like a natural
ready.
disaster, or or something running around the house to stimulate more growth.
Yeah, we were like, okay, things are great in our relationship. We're as ready as we can be.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we shake things up a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember saying, I feel that if I'm going to grow spiritually more beyond where I'm at now, the only way to do that is through family.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that it was going to be a challenge and I knew that it was going to be tough. And I don't think I could have ever prepared for how it was going to change us or how tough it would be on the relationship. And now we're just in it. And I'm having these new insights and this new level of compassion for parents. But I'm also really shocked at how little support there is and how little we're talking about this openly.
Mm-hmm.
Like we were just looking at the stats, right? 1 in 5 couples get divorced within the first year of having a child. And the reasons for that are a diminishing sex life, which is
Ob-
absurd.
Obvious, like, gonna happen.
Yeah, okay, we'll talk about that. And a lack of communication and constant arguing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like all of those things are inevitable. Not that constant arguing, but there's going to be communication stuff that's going to come up. And who on earth is thinking that you're going to have a lot of sex in the first year of having a child? How is that a reason for divorcing? It's wild to me that that's a thing.
That speaks to what the foundation of a lot of relationships is,
Mm-hmm.
right? And sex is very helpful in our relationship for
Mm-hmm.
connection, but it's not our only thing.
Yeah.
And early on, I remember noticing when we weren't having enough sex or weren't having sort of the right amount of sex, we would struggle.
Yeah.
But as we built more connection tools and more trust in one another and this sort of depth of connection, we could sacrifice that. And we
Mm-hmm.
had our ups and downs with that over the years. And so I feel like you and I have set up this groundwork to deal with these things that are actually happening in our relationship right now. Like diminished sex life, more arguing, more miscommunication,
Yeah.
and more just like being on edge,
Yeah, you're
right?
exhausted, different roles and responsibilities. Like I'm never sleeping through the night, right? And I carry a lot more of the physical labor in every way,
Yeah.
in terms of parenting. And so it's almost as though it doesn't matter how much you do, there's still like a little bit of resentment that I have, even if I'm conscious of it and I can see all of the other things that you're doing for us, which is almost everything. You know, I was telling our friend the other day, for the first 3 months, I never cooked. I still hardly ever clean anything. You do all the dishes, you take care of everything, you do all of our land work, like you make sure everything in the house is taken care of. You take care of so much. And yet, because there is this constant demand for my physical body and my energy, and I'm not sleeping, I can find myself feeling really resentful of you just because you have freedom.
Yeah. And in terms of the physical demands and the in touchness with the baby, this is not a 50-50 arrangement right
Yeah.
now. And you and I talked about that going in, that's our desire. But I also just want to acknowledge that I feel like I cannot be 50-50 with you in this phase
Yeah, you can't.
of the
It's not
parenthood journey.
possible. It's not
Yeah.
possible. And that's another thing that people aren't prepared for in a way. And it's like we have all of these ideas of how things are going to look and then we get there, you know, but there's things that you can do to prepare. And I remember years and years ago, going back to the sex piece, where you and I were sitting in front of each other and we were acknowledging how kind of dependent our relationship was on sex. And we
Yeah.
were like, hey, we don't do well if we're not having sex. And we're going to get to a point. This was like 7 years ago. We were really new. We're going to get to a point one day when we want to have kids and we know that there's going to be a lot less sex. We need to really work on our friendship. And so we spent years doing that. And so we get these couples now and they have a baby and then they're like, oh, we're not having sex. There's something wrong. We're going to get divorced. But really, it's just normal, you know? And
It's a normal occurrence. And unfortunately, a very normal result of that is that people break up and you end up with split families.
yeah,
Because the foundation of the relationship isn't there.
yeah. But it's the worst time.
It's the worst time.
It's the worst time to make any decisions. I was talking to a friend the other day who they had just had a child as well. And you and I were having a hard day and I was feeling really frustrated. And I started just texting all my friends who had kids. A lot of them have kids 10 years ago, so they're far ahead of me. Some of them just had kids, and I was like, how are you guys doing in your marriage? Or like, was it hard for you in the first year? Every single person I talked to was like, hands down, the hardest part was the first 3 to 4 years. We had almost no connection. Just wait, be patient. It's freaking hard and it will get better, but you have to do the work. And every single parent said that to me. And I was like, oh, how many times did you want to burn it down? You know, and they were like, all the time. You know, it's hard. And it's not the kid that's hard. It's everything around it. And that doesn't mean that having a child isn't a great decision and having a family isn't amazing, because it's like the best thing I've ever done. But we definitely need more support, more containers to even just talk about it and normalize it. Because as soon as I was napping with Rhea, and as soon as I came out of that nap and having had a conversation with so many of my friends who had been through it, they all said the same thing. I felt this renewed sense of commitment to our marriage after that, when right before going in, I was kind of like, oh man, this isn't going well.
We're not gonna make it.
Yeah. And then I was like, right, this is normal. Everybody said the same thing. It's okay that we're not thriving right now in our relationship, and it's going to get better.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we need those reminders, and we need other people to be in the boat with us.
Yeah, like we need to be held.
Yeah.
We certainly need to be held by a community that has a larger view of the scope of this journey, and is people who are able to hold us from both angles, you know, like our single friends or friends who don't have kids,
Mm-hmm.
and the parents who are like, hey, like, we've been there, here's what it was like,
Yeah.
here's some tips, here's some advice for how to
Mm-hmm.
get through this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Don't pull the chute, don't pull the eject button necessarily. Like, it sounds like you've got some unmet needs. Here's how you could perhaps get those needs met in this unique time in your life.
Yeah.
We need more community support in this world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm really passionate about group programs. And we also need, it's like we're living in a relationship illiterate society.
Yeah,
Like,
we totally
we
are.
don't really know how to go deep in relationship and how to set a really good foundation that can stand this test, right? The fact that so many marriages break speaks to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the messages that I grew up with was that you just figure it out on your own, relationships. And if it's not working, you just like switch out your partner for a new one.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've learned since then is that there's actually a whole school of material out there. And there's a whole bunch of masters who have mastered relationships and learned the statistics, learned what works in relationships, a whole generation before us
Mm-hmm.
that teach this stuff. And all the tools are basically out there. Like, the field is still evolving, but
Yeah.
there's so much out there. And most of us just need to take the time and find a space where we can go learn that stuff.
Totally. And the funny thing is, when you say mastered, they've mastered understanding the concepts and they've mastered drawing on the tools, but they've not mastered the actual relationships. And that again is so comforting. I remember when we were at Esalen years
Mhm.
ago and we were with Harville Hendricks and Helen LaKelly Hunt, and they wrote Getting Love You Want for people who haven't heard of that book.
Mm-hmm.
They've sold millions of copies.
Yeah, it was basically probably the number one relationship book in terms of copies sold.
For
ever.
sure. Yeah. And it's incredible and helped me a lot. I read it in my 20s and I was like, this could double as a parenting book. It's amazing. And I remember them telling a story about how 10 years into developing Imago, which is their therapeutic model for couples work,
Mm-hmm.
which I did level 1 training in, and your co-facilitator, Nick, he did the full certification for your conscious relationship counsel for men. And I remember them talking about how they walked into the room full of their students. They had been 10 years into their Imago development at this point, and they just said, we're getting divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And all of their students were like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, all they're like, teachers that they were teaching.
Yeah,
right?
these
We're
were
like,
other
"Yo,
therapists that were learning from, and they're like, what are you talking about? You can't get divorced.
you can't. You'll destroy this entire community and the whole underpinning of this philosophy."
Yeah. Right. But it was such a relief hearing that. And then even watching them, he's in his 80s. I think she's a bit younger than him. And, even they had their own funny dynamic. They had a few bickers here and there. And I was just like, oh, right. It's human. We're human. And I interviewed Charlie and Linda Bloom the other day, and they've been married for 50 years. And I was like, when's, the last time you wanted to burn it all down? And he joked. He was like, 3 weeks ago. And it can really help to remember that the goal of doing this work isn't perfection, and that there's nobody out there that's going to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And your relationship's always going to have challenges, but do you have the toolkit to actually handle the challenges? Like, would you go backcountry hiking with flip-flops and no water?
Yeah.
No. But why do we go into marriages with no tools, no commitment? People say, oh, well, if it needs work, if we have to go to therapy, then there must be something wrong with this
Huge.
relationship. We should just
Yep.
not be together. I
Huge
hear
myth.
that all the time.
Mm-hmm. If we have to go to therapy, it's already broken. It's already too far gone.
Yeah.
If we need to get help from a professional, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Which is, knowing what I know now, it doesn't make any sense to think that way. That's really just resistance.
It is.
It's resistance to doing the work and maybe looking at your own shit, uncovering some uncomfortable things and having to face them, particularly in front of your partner.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a lot of it is really just your ego being threatened and, being cheap about spending money on things like that.
Yeah.
Right. but like we take out loans and we spend 4 years doing bachelor's degrees and maybe 3 more years doing a master's degree so that we can master a particular topic and teach it or do it in our professional life. But we also some people spend 50, 100, $200,000 on their wedding.
Yeah.
Right? Which represents the most important relationship in their life. But not a lot of people actually take the time and put the money down to learn about how they can be better in relationship and do what you're saying is like do the work, right? What those other people were saying is do the work. What is doing the work in the context of the people that you reached out to?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think everybody had something different to say. A lot of the women, what they told me was patience was part of it. Really being patient to wait it out and to give grace, you know, and also to like look inward and for both people to actually go off and do what they need to do to not only nurture themselves, but also to be able to show up strong in the relationship. And that I think that looks different, especially when it comes to in a parent context, but in a marriage in general, it's going to look different for a man versus a woman. I know that a lot of times, you know, men, from what I've seen, they need other men, and women, we need other women.
Yeah. I think.
Hold on, pause.
Oh, okay. It's just a saw.
Are you sure?
Yeah, it's a saw.
I thought she was screaming.
No, it's a saw.
Okay. Scared me. I was like, that was Rhea.
No, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, women need other women and patience. I would say men definitely need other men, but the journey, I think, of doing the work from what I've experienced and what I've seen up until this point is, if I could sum it up into like a phrase, it's about hold your center. Hold your center. Because in my experience, men are more dependent on sex in the relationship for the most part, for feeling connected and feeling fulfilled.
Yeah.
And they also, you know, get a lot of energy from their partner, a lot of attention from their partner before the baby comes along. And when baby comes along, they are second place in terms of attention and priorities. And they are lucky if they get any sex in the first year. You know, it'll be very sparse for the most part, for most men. And so being in that position, it's easy for your mind to turn against your partner if you're very reliant on sex and attention from your partner to be committed to the relationship.
Yeah.
And so when I say hold your center, it's like, know your commitment. Like, what did you commit to? Did you commit to being with this person? Then that means also committing to be with them if there's periods where you're not having sex and they're not giving you attention. And how do you meet your own needs in that space? Hold your center. How can you do self-care, take care of your body, take care of your mind, take care of your sexual energy, give yourself the attention that you need, this sort of like reparenting type thing that I like to teach men as well, so that you're good, so that you're okay, and you're not coming to your partner with resentment, like, give me energy, give me sex, like, why don't I get any of this from you? Because you can't bring that energy to a mother who's giving her everything.
No, it's really not possible. And it's like so much pressure. I'm so grateful that you never did that. I haven't felt that from you ever. And I'm sure you felt very neglected.
I miss you for sure.
Yeah.
I miss the connection that we had.
Me too.
But I also, accept this reality. I know that all of those resources are being funneled into this little human that's like the biggest project of our lives. And I have enough personal resources to be like, okay, I'll just take care of myself for a while.
Yeah.
I'm just going to take care of myself, love myself, give myself the attention that I need so that I can be here for you, so you can be here for her. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's tough, I think, for a lot of moms. I mean, I haven't experienced being touched out in terms of, you know,
overtouched.
being overtouched by my kid and then not wanting to be touched at all by you. but that's because I think touch is my love language.
Mm.
And so that's not a thing for me, but I can totally see how that would be hard if touch isn't your primary love language, because especially if you have a pretty typical baby, which they want to sleep on you all day long. Like we have a contact baby. Most people have contact babies. It's not normalized in our society, but it is actually so normal for a
Mm.
baby to not want to sleep unless they're on you
Mm.
all day and all night. We have one of those babies.
Yeah.
I slept sitting up with her on my chest for 7 months. We co-sleep, and she's pretty much always on one of our bodies.
Yeah. So that means for that 7 months, there was never a moment in the evening where you and I were able to chat, watch anything on a screen, like nothing.
Yeah. And not to mention, I couldn't even roll over and give you a kiss or a hug. I was like set up with this whole system just so that I could sort of sleep sitting up,
Mm-hmm.
because she had reflux in the beginning too, right? So I had to like keep her propped up.
Yeah.
And I remember just looking over at you and just being like, oh, I wish I could just like come over there and cuddle you for a minute. And these are realities that we're never really prepared for, but at least in our minds we should entertain the idea that it could be that way,
Mm-hmm.
and have the devotional energy in our awareness that we can bring to the project, like you called it, of having
Mm-hmm.
a child. And also, what are we going to do when we don't have all of those other things? And I think that's come up for you and I, especially in the last little while, where, I feel like some of our stuff that we had maybe resolved has sort of reemerged, some of our family patterns, because we are not having any connection time really, which we're working on. And we also are building a family. And
Mm-hmm.
so family system stuff is coming up again.
Yep.
And I wasn't fully prepared. I thought that kind of stuff, I thought it was done, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not. And so it's nice that, you and I are like, okay, well, let's go back to therapy.
Yeah.
Let's just go into therapy.
Yeah.
And it was just such an easy decision for us. The moment I was like, hey, do you want to go see this person? You were like, sure.
Let's go.
And that's the kind of thing that couples need to have in order to make it and to come out on the other side better than when they came.
Yeah.
And that's why I love that you hold these containers for men, because I mean, you've told me stories, not with any names, but you've told me stories of guys who have come in and been on the brink of divorce and then left, and their marriage is thriving.
Yep.
And it's not because of you per se. It's not like you saved their marriage, but your container certainly provided the space for them to save their marriages, because they came in, they learned the tools that they needed to learn. They had the support, they had the feedback from people who have studied and trained in this for a long time, you and Nick, and they have other guys around to like really hold them.
Mm-hmm.
And they take that strength and they go back into their homes and they fix things.
Yep.
And I just love that you do that, because I see what a need there is for it. And I kind of wish we could just like clone that and just spread it out over, millions of people. But
Yeah. Me too.
it's a good start.
Me too. Yeah. And I take credit for creating a container, but the guys, Bodhi, Bodhi hears the other dogs barking and he just jumps in. The guys come in and they learn the tools, but we also take them through a layer of this sort of deeper work,
Mm-hmm.
looking at their relationship patterns and how they were formed in childhood, and how that then forms their imago and the relationship that they then unconsciously seek out, and the problems, the patterns
Mm-hmm.
that they actually end up co-creating with their partner. They pick a partner who fits the mold a little bit, perhaps unknowingly,
Mm-hmm.
and then these patterns start unfolding and they're like, oh, this again. So I did want to dig into that with you now that we've sort of just touched on parenting, and we'll for sure talk about parenting again. I think we could probably spend at least an hour once a year just talking about parenting and what we're learning and what we're seeing.
Yeah, I love talking about that stuff. It's my fave.
Mm-hmm. But as far as the solution goes to, how do we bring this number down of 20% of people who have their kid in the first year break up, divorce? How do we fix that? How do we bring that number down? I think you and I are aligned in the solution here, which is really just training, relationship training,
Mm-hmm.
and containers that that hold and create healing and give skills to people so that they can navigate this difficult thing.
Yeah.
That's difficult for the best of us.
Yeah.
It's difficult for Harville and Helen. It's difficult for us. And so let's talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it applies to anyone. And, if you don't have children, this is the best time to go into a container. This is the best time to enter therapy. It's the best time to do everything you can possibly do to strengthen your relationship, because you're not going to have a lot of time. Newsflash, or you'll have none.
Yeah.
You don't have time to read books. You don't have time to listen to podcasts. And you're definitely not going to a relationship retreat. It's way harder to show up for any sort of training. I tell this to women all the time when they're like, oh yeah, no, I don't understand anything about birth and pregnancy, but I'm thinking having a kid soon. I'm like, well, you better study now, because you're not going to have time for that.
Yep.
And it's the same with relationships. Do everything that you possibly can.
Yep.
And if you don't have kids yet, get in there.
Get after it early.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do the relationship training early. I think the best time that people can do relationship training is when they're early in a relationship, the first couple years.
Yeah, we started 2 months in. Our first fight, we went to therapy.
Yeah. It's a great time to do it because you have the time to do this stuff.
Yeah.
You have the imago right in front of you. The hologram of what your unconscious mind is looking for is sitting in front of you, ready for you to do this work. And you have the time to go pick up the tools and practice them. So that is the best time. But there's also other optimal turning points. I have guys in conscious relationship counsel who have adult children. And they're like, you know what? Kids are out of the house. We got a little space now. And I'm realizing, I've read this book. I read that book. I listened to a podcast. I'm like, hey, we need a level up here.
Yeah.
And so they join the program. And, we have guys, we had a 79-year-old man come through recently.
Nice.
Yeah. So.
But how did that go for him?
Really well.
Yeah. But he was married.
He was actually separated from his wife.
Okay.
And dating her again.
Okay.
And they got back together.
Nice.
Yeah. During the program.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, you've got a program for relationship anxiety that's primarily targeted to women. I know some men who have taken your program.
Yeah,
though.
I have some men. Of course, my company's called Rising Woman, and I tend to just speak in a more female way. Like, women are drawn to my work. I mostly work with women, but it's definitely not gendered. And yeah, it's called Freedom from Relationship Anxiety, and we work with essentially our attachment wounds. And I work with a lot of people who they chase love, they get extremely anxious and they're not able to communicate their needs. They over pursue people that are not healthy for them, or they just have no idea how to even identify what a secure relationship looks like. And so they're kind of caught in these cycles, like addicted to unhealthy behaviors, dating apps, that kind of thing.
And conversely, on the other side of things, in my men's program, the most common thing that comes up, the most common pattern that guys come in with is this, like, I want to be in relationship, but I actually keep finding myself pulling away from relationship. And I have this dissonance in my own mind between, like, yeah, I want to be in one, but then, like, once I get kind of deep into one, I just pull away instinctively.
Yeah.
And I just kind of, like, don't want to be there anymore. And then things get a little dicey. She or he complains that I'm pulling my energy away, and then I pull my energy away further.
Yeah, a little bit of avoidance going on.
Yeah, so there is this more common minimizing or avoidant stance with the men that I work with, and you're seeing a lot of anxious maximizing in the people that you work with.
Yeah, do you want to break that down for me? Like the minimizing, maximizing? Because I think a lot of people would really resonate with that description.
Yeah, so the origins of this minimizer maximizer style and how it shows up in adult relationship lie in the type of environment that you were in as a child and how you experienced it, how you perceived it.
Yeah.
And so guys or ladies who end up being minimizers, and they end up having a tendency to minimize their partner and the things that they're bringing to them, minimize their own feelings, and pull away from relationship, often grew up in a house where they experienced an overbearing, judgmental caregiver.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly resonate with that. Like, my mother was present, but I felt like in a way she was too present, or like my feelings weren't honored.
Mm-hmm.
I was in more of a contractual relationship with her where I had to be a certain way, otherwise I was bad. And so I found myself pulling, looking back now, it's just a direct experience when you're a kid, but
Yeah.
pulling my energy away and hiding it from her while subtly trying to mess with her and like hurt her because I resented her for suppressing my authentic expression as a kid. So I had a lot of female teachers in school, and I would just fuck with them all the time until I got kicked out of class, and then until I got kicked out of school.
Yeah.
I was just this like goofy kid who got a rise out of pissing women off.
And you still do that to me though.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. It's very challenging.
It's built in to the software.
It's really tough. That's the thing that's been coming up a lot with us since having a child though, right? And I've looked at that and I'm like, oh, it's interesting how now that we have a child and I'm actually embodying mother fully in the home, I notice that sometimes that aspect is coming out in you where you're poking me more and you're like doing things to get a rise out of me. And I'm like, oh, I have way less tolerance for this right now.
Yeah, you definitely have lower tolerance because I've always been goofy.
Yeah.
And I've always messed with you. But you have a very thin tolerance these days.
Well, to be fair, I've always requested that you not do that.
So funny because you used to like jump out and try to scare me. Like,
I know, but that's different. That's different. That's, to me, there's a difference between playing and taunting.
Yeah.
Right? And there's also an energetic frequency to it where we're like literally both engaged in a playful thing where we're trying to scare each other or spook versus you can tell when there's something coming out from one of our histories.
Resentful. Like when it's like backed with resentment.
Yeah.
Is the issue.
And sometimes it can be disguised as something that's goofy or silly or playful, but really there's a poke happening.
Yeah. It's like, no, fuck you. Basically, there's like a fuck you underneath.
Like the other day when you were at the table and you already know that we can't give our baby salt and electrolytes, but you kind of looked over at me and you were like, bad daddy. And then you were like, oh, mommy says no. And then you gave her a sip and then you said it really loudly. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, I was like, what is this guy doing right now? He's like totally provoking me. And it really pissed me off because I was PMSing as well. And I was ready to burn it down. I was like, I'm pulling him aside. I'm breaking up with him tomorrow. I was done, You
disobeyed me.
And then I woke up the next morning with my moon and I was like, never mind. I'm not going to break up with him.
I'll just bring it up on the podcast.
But seriously, this is the kind of stuff that still comes up in a relationship where people are putting us on their vision boards. And I just want to share stuff like that because I'm like, hey guys, we're not, dancing around in our underwear doing Kundalini all day and eye gazing.
But we are doing that a lot.
I am doing that.
Jeez.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
It's true. But there's also other things happening,
yeah.
right? And so, it's just, I like to talk about that. But we kind of went off track. So let's talk about minimizing.
Yeah.
Wait, did you just talk about minimizing?
I did talk about minimizing.
Let's talk about maximizing.
Yeah. So, men who grew up with a mother like me often end up in the minimizer role where they pull their energy away from relationship instinctively. And when their partner ramps up the energy and starts sort of bringing it to him, he just pulls away further.
Or shuts it down and it's dismissiveness.
Yeah. Or just
comes
like,
out
no,
as
no,
dismissiveness. Or like, it's not a big deal. Why are you making a big deal of this? Or like, I was just kidding.
Yeah.
Or
like, this isn't about you. Like, that's probably the most dismissive thing that I could say to you in that moment if you were to like challenge me on feeding her electrolytes and soda water. Be like, this isn't about you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I meet a lot of men like that who grew up with mothers similar to mine. Sometimes it's fathers too. My father was basically a lot like me,
Mm-hmm.
a minimizer himself.
Yeah.
And so I'm modeling in a way
Mm-hmm.
my father and how he shows up in relationship, and I'm
Yeah.
reacting to my mother in how I show up in relationship.
Yeah, and I kind of mirror your mom, not in some
Mhm.
ways. In some ways, I'm complete opposite of her, but in some ways, I'm a lot like her in the sense that my mode when I'm feeling activated is to be critical,
Mhm.
right? And I can also be controlling. I mean, we both are. That's the annoying part about our relationship is we're both very controlling.
Mhm.
Just of our environment, and we have strong preferences of how we like things. Neither one of us is very passive, and so that also means that we can butt heads.
Oh yeah, we clash.
Yeah,
It's
right.
just a
We've
consequence
always,
of being who we are.
yeah,
And there have been times where we've had a conversation like, Jesus, is this like, are we just incompatible
yeah,
because of this?
yeah,
But the truth is, you're going to have some things that look like incompatibility, like this. But and the consequence, or sort of the darker side of this, is that we butt heads.
yeah,
But the light side is we can create a lot in our
yeah,
lives. We can
yeah.
create a lot around
I
us.
mean, look at
And
our lives. We have a huge community. We have so many aunties and uncles around.
yeah,
You know, we have land projects going all the time. We have so many people coming to bless our family and to
yeah,
contribute to this shared vision because you and I have that. It's like when our leadership energy is channeled properly, it's
headed
beautiful.
in the right
Yeah.
direction. We both have the same vision in a way. Like we have different sides of it,
Yeah.
but we're both carrying the same vision.
Yeah.
And that's teamwork. That's
Yeah.
what it's like to be a team.
Yeah.
I had a man say to me once, when I got married, he
Mm.
was like, essentially, you're about to like form a super team,
Mm-hmm.
and your life is actually about to become a lot more convenient
Mm-hmm.
because you know who your person is and where you're going together.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a shared vision, it's just light the rocket thrusters,
Mm-hmm.
buddy. And he was so right.
Yeah.
So let's talk. Yeah. So maximizers end up being so often by having a caregiver, a primary caregiver who was inconsistently available.
Yeah, like hot and cold,
Yeah.
or they're one moment, they're not, or very
Yeah.
unpredictable, right? Which
Yes.
is my experience.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
So there's this sense of abandonment and
Mm-hmm.
feeling like the person wasn't there for them. And
Yeah.
maybe they were actually abandoned, or maybe they were
Yeah.
emotionally abandoned.
Yeah. Or in my case, both.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, friend, that's it. Part 2 is over on Ben's channel at Evolving Man. You're going to see it linked at the end of this episode, and you're also going to see it linked in the description box below. Go on over and visit that if you'd like to finish this episode with us. Also, for more information on Ben's Conscious Relationship Counsel for Men, the link is below, as is my program, Freedom from Relationship Anxiety, and a link to my new journal, Becoming the One. All right, looking forward to seeing you over on Ben's channel. See you there.